Her watch glinted as she swapped the vials. Again, my transplant-scarred hands didn't tremble this time. The blue glow of the security monitor cast shadows across my face as I watched Vanessa methodically transfer my research to containers bearing her name. 3 weeks of meticulous work disappearing in 3 minutes of theft. I could recite the security code to that lab in my sleep, 47923. The same numbers as our childhood address. Sentimental for someone so calculating. The camera's timestamp read 2:17 a.m. The third time this month she'd come during my supposed shift break. From my darkened workstation in the ER, I took another sip of lukewarm coffee. The bitter taste matched my mood perfectly. I zoomed in as Vanessa's perfectly manicured fingers adjusted the labels on my sepsis treatment samples. Even through the grainy feed, I could see the satisfaction in her posture. My own hands curled reflexively. Transplant rejection had saved my life but left me with neurological damage. The tremors made certain surgical procedures impossible. Made my brilliant sister the surgeon and me the research nurse. At least that's how the hospital director introduced me at functions. When I was introduced at all. "Still here, Jules?" Night charge nurse Malik appeared beside me, chart in hand. "Just finishing documentation." I switched screens with practiced ease. "You work too hard." His eyes crinkled with genuine concern. "Those tremors get worse when you're tired." I stretched my fingers. The scars caught the light. "Almost done." When he left, I switched back to the security feed. Vanessa was gone. My samples with her. The lab looked undisturbed, as though no betrayal had occurred. I opened my encrypted journal file and added today's entry. The keyboard felt cold beneath my fingertips as I typed, "V took samples from series C17 through C24. All properly logged backups in place." Tomorrow, she would announce another breakthrough in her sepsis protocol. Another step toward her name on the hospital wing. Another achievement stolen from her broken little sister. I pulled the medical-grade flash drive from my pocket. Most security ignored it as just another medical device attached to my therapeutic wrist brace. Their mistake. I plugged it in and began my ritual. Back up everything. Document everything. The soft clicks of the keyboard created a rhythm beneath my careful fingers. People always underestimated what steady purpose could accomplish, even with unsteady hands. When the backup completed, I shut down the terminal and headed toward the lab. The hospital corridors were quiet, lit only by the blue-white emergency lighting. My footsteps echoed against the polished floor. The night shift skeleton crew barely looked up as I passed. At the lab door, I paused, fishing out my ID badge. The scanner beeped approval, green light. The door hissed open. Inside, the familiar smell of antiseptic and machinery greeted me. I moved directly to the refrigeration unit and examined the remaining samples. Exactly as I'd suspected. All my most promising compounds gone. I pulled a second set of vials from my lab coat pocket. Backups I'd prepared weeks ago, anticipating Vanessa's actions. My hands trembled slightly as I placed them in their proper positions. 3 vials, 3 replacements. 3 moves in a chess game my sister didn't know we were playing. The whir of the centrifuge provided cover as I updated the digital logs. Vanessa was careful to document her presence always, but she didn't know about the secondary tracking system I'd installed. Every vial had a traceable biomarker, every sample a digital fingerprint. I finished just as my pager buzzed. Multiple car accident arriving in 20 minutes. I closed the lab, straightening my scrubs as I hurried toward the ER. The weight of the flash drive in my brace pressed against my wrist, reassuring in its presence. Let her take the vials, the real research remained safely with me. 3 days later, I stood at the back of the hospital auditorium as Vanessa presented her findings to the board. Her voice carried confidently across the crowded room. My voice, my words, my research, repackaged with her name. She didn't even glance my direction as she detailed the breakthrough in the early sepsis detection that I had pioneered. The hospital director beamed from the front row. His protege was excelling again. Her crisp white coat still looked fresh at the end of a 12-hour shift. Mine always showed the evidence of actual patient care. This detection method could revolutionize emergency sepsis intervention. she explained, clicking to the next slide. My slide. By identifying these specific markers, we can begin treatment protocols nearly 4 hours earlier than current standards. I counted silently, matching my breathing to the rhythm. 1 betrayal, stealing my initial research notes. 2 betrayals, taking credit for my diagnostic approach. 3 betrayals, presenting my life's work as her own. 3 glove snaps, 3 lies. She finished to enthusiastic applause. As the crowd dispersed, I maintained my position, invisible against the back wall. The director clapped Vanessa on the shoulder, his voice carrying. The pharmaceutical partners will be extremely interested. This could mean millions in research funding. Vanessa smiled, her perfect teeth catching the light. I'm just getting started. I slipped out before they noticed me. In the hallway, I checked my watch. Night shift began in 4 hours. Phase 2 would begin then. My fingers traced the outline of the flash drive hidden in my wrist brace. The tremors would serve a purpose, finally. Some conditions can't be cured, but they can be weaponized. The morning rounds always felt like theater. 25 medical professionals huddled around patient beds, hanging on Vanessa's every syllable. Today, she stood in the center of Surgical Team B, tablet in hand, presenting her latest case. Patient exhibits classic early sepsis indicators that would typically go unnoticed. Her manicured finger tapped the screen. Using the new protocol I've developed, we caught it 6 hours before conventional markers would trigger alarm. My jaw tightened. The new protocol I've developed. Mr. Abernathy in bed 4 was my patient. My diagnosis, my treatment plan that had saved his life when he arrived last week with what appeared to be simple food poisoning. Vanessa continued. The biomarkers show clear elevation of particular cytokines that standard tests miss entirely. Someone bumped my elbow. Dr. Lin, one of the few who actually acknowledged my existence. That's your sepsis case, isn't it? She whispered. I nodded slightly, keeping my expression neutral. It was. The rounds moved on to the next patient. I stayed behind, checking Mr. Abernathy's IV line. His chart had been updated overnight, Vanessa's name now listed as consulting physician. Mine relegated to supporting staff. You look like you could use coffee. Mr. Abernathy's raspy voice startled me. Just tired. I adjusted his oxygen monitor. That doctor yesterday, the fancy one, she took credit for figuring me out. His eyes were sharper than most realized. But you're the one who knew something was wrong when everybody else was sending me home. My hands trembled slightly as I checked his pulse. The important thing is you're getting better. Don't let people walk over you, nurse. He sighed, settling back against his pillows. I spent 40 years letting people take credit for my work. Don't make my mistake. I squeezed his hand gently and moved toward the nurse's station. My clipboard slipped from my fingers, scattering papers across the freshly polished floor. The tremor had intensified, as it always did with anger. Let me help! One of the new interns, Zoe, knelt beside me, gathering papers. Thanks. I focused on steadying my breathing. Control the tremor, control the emotion. I read your original note on Mr. Abernathy, she said quietly, handing me the stack. Brilliant catch on the sepsis. You documented it 3 days before Dr. Lawrence made her discovery. I met her eyes briefly. Documentation is important. More should read it. Her expression held something I rarely saw directed at me in this hospital. Respect. As she walked away, I felt the weight of the clipboard in my hands. Documentation was indeed important. Every stolen idea, every misattributed discovery, every manipulated credit, all meticulously recorded in my private files, evidence accumulating like bacterial colonies in a petri dish. Vanessa's voice carried from the end of the hall, her Apple Watch catching the light as she gestured to 2 board members. The protocol will be featured at next month's surgical demonstration. We're already seeing remarkable results. As if she had done anything beyond stealing my work. At lunch, I deliberately positioned myself at the corner table in the cafeteria. Maximum visibility, high traffic area. The tray felt cool against my palms as I set it down. Hospital meatloaf, overcooked vegetables, the smell of industrial disinfectant barely masked by food service steam. Mind if I join you? Frank, head of security, stood with his tray of similar institutional offerings. Please. I gestured to the empty chair. Frank had worked at Northern Memorial for 15 years, knew every corridor, every access point, every blind spot in the security system. He dropped heavily into the plastic chair, his security badge clinking against the table. How's the new biometric system working out? I asked, cutting my meatloaf into precise squares. Still working out the kinks? He sighed. The server room needs recalibration every 3 days. Management wants top-level security but won't approve overtime for proper maintenance. Must be frustrating. I took a small bite, maintaining eye contact. Interested but casual. You have no idea. The OR suites are especially sensitive. One glitch during a procedure? He shook his head. I imagine the calibration schedule must be pretty strict then. Tuesdays and Fridays, 2 a.m. sharp, only time the surgical wing's guaranteed empty. He looked up. Why the interest in security protocols? Not exactly nursing territory. I smiled, lifting my trembling hand slightly. Just curious. These hands make me hyper-aware of system vulnerabilities. Frank nodded sympathetically. How long have you had the tremors? Since the transplant rejection 7 years ago. Some neural pathways got damaged during treatment. I deliberately let my fork clatter against the plate. Makes me drop things at the worst moments. As if on cue, my water glass tipped over, sending ice cubes skidding across the table. Frank jumped up, grabbing napkins. Several nearby staff turned to look. I'm so sorry, I said, loud enough to be remembered later. No problem at all, Frank replied, helping mop up the mess. Over his shoulder, I watched Vanessa enter the cafeteria with the hospital director and 2 board members. Her surgical cap was gone, hair perfectly styled despite a morning in the OR. She looked my way once, gaze sliding past without recognition. Perfect. This very public minor disaster would cement my whereabouts in multiple memories. Alibis weren't built on grand gestures, but on mundane moments witnessed by many. Later, as my night shift began, I moved through the quiet corridors with purpose. The hospital transformed after dark, the daytime bustle replaced by a different rhythm. More alarms, fewer voices. The squeak of my shoes against the polished floor echoed slightly. 2:17 a.m. The server room door required dual authentication, badge and fingerprint. My badge worked normally. For my fingerprint, I pressed my thumb against the scanner, simultaneously applying a micro-thin adhesive patch containing a duplicated print of the security administrator. A hack developed during countless sleepless nights of research. The scanner hesitated, then blinked green. Inside, the server room hummed with cooling fans and processing power. Rows of blinking lights created a technological constellation in the dimness. I moved directly to the maintenance terminal, logging in with the temporary credentials I'd created during my last visit. My fingers moved steadily across the keyboard. The tremor medication was working perfectly tonight. I opened the biometric security protocols, navigating to the user authentication database. Vanessa's credentials appeared on screen, her access levels among the highest in the hospital. I created a shadow account that mirrored her credentials exactly, with one crucial difference: a triggered response to specific access patterns. When activated, it would create a perfect security trap. The click of the keyboard felt satisfying beneath my fingertips. Lines of code unfurled like surgical sutures, each one precise and purposeful. Unlike the operating room where my tremors had ended my surgical career before it began, here my hands could create something flawless. A sound in the corridor sent my heart racing. I quickly minimized the screen, moving to a diagnostic terminal as the door opened. "Evening rounds," said the night security guard, looking surprised to find anyone there. I held up my badge. "Systems running slow in the ER terminals. IT asked me to check the connection while things are quiet." He nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Just doing my rounds. Don't work too hard." When the door closed behind him, I returned to my task. Final command sequence, verification protocol, implementation complete. I logged out, erasing all traces of my presence from the system memory. The server room door closed behind me with a pneumatic hiss. In the corridor, I checked my watch. 3:22 a.m. The night shift would notice my extended absence soon. I hurried toward the ER, mentally rehearsing my excuse about the difficult patient in bed 12. As I rounded the corner, I nearly collided with Vanessa. She looked startled to see anyone in this wing at this hour. Jules, her surprise quickly masked by professional distance. Working late again? Always. I kept my expression neutral, checking on lab results. She nodded absently, already dismissing me. Good night, then. I watched her walk away, white coat fluttering slightly with each confident step. She had no idea what I'd set in motion. No concept that her stolen research empire now sat on a foundation of digital quicksand. The system blinked green, access granted, trap baited. Dawn broke through the windows as I finished my shift. Exhaustion settled into my bones, but satisfaction ran deeper. Phase 2 was complete. The hospital was waking up around me as I signed out my patients to the day nurse. Dr. Lawrence's sepsis protocol saved another one last night, she commented, reviewing my notes on a new admission. Brilliant work she's doing. I nodded, fighting the urge to correct her. Brilliant indeed. Outside, the morning air felt clean after 12 hours of hospital ventilation. I paused on the steps, watching staff arrive for the day shift. Their badges catching the sunlight as they hurried inside, unaware of the invisible architecture I was building around them. The hospital's promotional banner fluttered above the entrance. Northern Memorial, pioneering tomorrow's medicine today. Below it, newly installed, Vanessa's smiling face gazed confidently outward. Dr. Vanessa Lawrence, leading our sepsis research initiative. I turned away, heading toward my car. Let her smile for the cameras today. The spotlight cast the darkest shadows, and I worked best in shadows. The email arrived at 5:47 a.m., just as I was preparing to sleep after my night shift. Hospital-wide announcement from administration. Northern Memorial breakthrough. Clinical trials for the Lawrence Sepsis Protocol, LSP, begin next week. Dr. Vanessa Lawrence will lead a select surgical team in implementing this revolutionary approach. Medical staff briefing mandatory. I stared at my tablet, fatigue momentarily forgotten. She was moving faster than I'd anticipated. Clinical trials meant full implementation, published papers, permanent attribution, my protocol with her name permanently attached. Sleep abandoned, I drove back to the hospital. The morning shift was in full swing when I badged through the employee entrance. I avoided the main corridors, taking service hallways to the research lab. The room required keycard access, but as a contributing researcher, my credentials still worked. The lab was empty this early. Most researchers arrived after 9. Perfect. I moved quickly to the sample storage, scanning shelves of carefully labeled vials. There, the sepsis protocol samples had been completely relabeled. Principal investigator Dr. V. Lawrence marked each container, my name nowhere to be found. I ran my finger along the cold steel edge of the storage cabinet. 7 years of research, my life work, stolen and rebranded in less than 3 months. The sound of voices approaching sent me to the computer terminal. I needed to appear purposeful. As the door opened, I pulled up a routine analysis screen. Jules? Dr. Chen looked surprised. Aren't you coming off night shift? Just checking some results before I go home. I gestured vaguely at the screen. Dedication. He nodded appreciatively. Have you seen the announcement? Your sister's sepsis protocol is going to clinical trials. Quite impressive how quickly she developed it. I managed a tight smile. Vanessa has always been efficient. You should be proud. Having 2 medical professionals in one family is remarkable. If only he knew what family really meant to Vanessa. How easily she'd sacrificed me to advance her career. How completely she'd erased my contributions. I logged out of the terminal and gathered my things. Just trying to keep up with her. As I turned to leave, the lab door opened again. Vanessa entered, already dressed in her presentation-ready white coat despite the early hour. She faltered slightly, seeing me. Jules, what brings you to the research lab? Her tone remained professionally pleasant, but her eyes narrowed slightly. Just finishing some work. I moved toward the door, intentionally bumping her shoulder as I passed. Congratulations on the clinical trials. Thank you. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It's been a challenging project. I'm sure stealing research is always challenging. The words slipped out before I could stop them, low enough that only she could hear. Her expression hardened momentarily before resuming its professional mask. You look tired, Jules. Perhaps you should reduce your night shifts. She adjusted her Apple Watch. The tremors get worse with fatigue, don't they? I held up my hands, letting her see the slight but persistent shaking. Some days are better than others. Such a shame about your surgical career. You had potential. She checked her watch again. I need to prep for the demonstration next week. Take care of yourself. As she turned away, I felt the familiar surge of anger-intensified tremors. My hands shook visibly now. I tucked them into my pockets and walked out, aware of how she'd weaponized my condition again. Always the subtle reminder of her surgical superiority, always the faint suggestion that my career was lesser. She had no idea how I'd weaponized the tremors, too. That evening, after a few hours of restless sleep, I returned for my shift. The hospital had transformed overnight. Banners announcing the Lawrence sepsis protocol hung in the main lobby. Promotional materials featured Vanessa's smiling face. A special display near administration detailed the groundbreaking research that would revolutionize sepsis treatment globally. My research, my protocols, my revolution. Pretty impressive, isn't it? Malik appeared beside me, following my gaze to the display. Your sister's going places. She certainly is. I kept my voice neutral. Must run in the family. All that medical brilliance. He smiled kindly. Though I have always thought your diagnostic instincts were sharper than most surgeons. His unexpected compliment caught me off guard. Thank you. Some of us notice who actually figures things out around here. He nodded toward the ER. Your shift starting soon? Just heading there now. The emergency department was unusually quiet, the calm before an inevitable storm. I used the downtime to access the surgical schedule from a terminal. The demonstration surgery was set for next Tuesday, 6 days away. Vanessa would perform a procedure on a septic patient using her protocol, observed by hospital investors and pharmaceutical representatives. I pulled up the OR preparation checklist. As expected, a complete biometric system check was scheduled the day before. All surgical theater access would be tested, all credentials verified, all equipment calibrated. Standard procedure for high-profile demonstrations. I opened a separate browser window and logged into the hospital's pharmaceutical inventory using my nursing credentials. The system showed our anesthesia tracking protocols, the vulnerable link in the surgical chain. I made note of the verification sequence, the digital signatures required, the timestamp tracking. Planning a career change to anesthesia? Dr. Lin's voice made me jump. I closed the window quickly, just checking medication availability for a potential septic patient. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my explanation. Smart to be prepared. We're getting more referrals since your sister's protocol was announced. Everyone wants the Lawrence treatment. I forced a smile. It's revolutionary. You two must have interesting family dinners comparing medical notes. If only she knew how long it had been since Vanessa and I had shared a meal. How completely my sister had distanced herself once her career accelerated beyond mine. The transplant that saved my life had created a schism between us. Her disgust at my failure to recover completely had never been verbalized but was evident in every interaction. We keep shop talk to a minimum, I replied vaguely. When Dr. Lin left, I reopened the medication system. Every anesthesia sign-out required dual authentication, the requesting provider and the dispensing pharmacist. During demonstrations, the system ran on an isolated protocol to prevent any network issues from disrupting critical medication delivery. I noted the isolation sequence, the secondary verification protocol, the override codes, all pieces of a puzzle I was assembling step by meticulous step. My pager beeped. Multiple vehicle accident incoming. 3 critical patients, ETA 4 minutes. I closed all windows, logged out, and headed to Trauma Bay 1. For the next 6 hours, sepsis protocols and revenge plans took second place to immediate life-saving measures. When the crisis passed, I found myself changing blood-soaked scrubs in the staff locker room. My hands trembled more than usual. Adrenaline aftermath combined with fatigue. As I fumbled with my shoe, a voice came from behind the row of lockers. The board is absolutely thrilled with the pharmaceutical interest. The hospital director speaking in low tones. Vanessa's demonstration next week could secure funding for the entire North Wing expansion. I appreciate your support, Richard. My sister's voice smooth and confident. This protocol will put Northern Memorial on the global map. The investors were particularly impressed with how quickly you developed it. Most researchers take years to reach this stage. A slight pause. I found a more efficient approach. However you did it, the results are spectacular. The pharmaceutical representatives are particularly eager to see the demonstration surgery. If all goes well, we're looking at a multi-million-dollar licensing deal. Their voices faded as they exited the locker room. I sat motionless on the bench, processing what I'd heard. Millions of dollars, hospital expansion, my research stolen and monetized beyond anything I'd imagined. The final betrayal was no longer personal, it was institutional, financial, systemic. That night, I accessed the operating room preparation area during my break. The surgical theaters were dark after hours, used only for emergencies. I moved with purpose, my badge allowing access to the general areas. The nurse preparation station required additional authentication, which my carefully cloned security profile provided. Inside, I worked quickly. The anesthesia verification system included a biometric reader that matched medication requests against authorized providers. I carefully placed a modified badge reader over the existing one, the alteration virtually undetectable unless specifically examined. When activated during the demonstration, it would create a credential conflict that would trigger the hospital's automatic lockdown protocol. The soft click of the overlay settling into place felt satisfying. I tested it once, ensuring it remained dormant until triggered by the specific sequence I'd programmed. Perfect. I replaced the equipment cover and exited the preparation area, moving through the surgical wing with practiced confidence. The OR itself remained locked, accessible only to surgical personnel. I wouldn't need direct access. The seeds I'd planted in the peripheral systems would cascade inward when activated. As I passed the main surgical board, I noticed Vanessa's demonstration was now officially scheduled. The Lawrence Sepsis Protocol Demonstration, or 3 Tuesday, 10 o'clock a.m. Attending physician, Dr. Vanessa Lawrence. Assistant, Dr. Howard Chen. Anesthesiologist, Dr. Patricia Winters, no mention of the research nurse whose work made it all possible. I traced my fingers over the cool glass covering the schedule display. 3 betrayals complete, 3 counter traps set, 3 days until activation. Back in the ER, I completed my shift with mechanical efficiency. The tremors were minimal tonight, my medication timed perfectly for the delicate work I'd just completed. Few understood how I'd learned to harness the tremors, to work around them, to transform limitation into specialization. Vanessa had always seen my condition as weakness. She never understood that some limitations force you to develop strengths others never discover. As dawn approached, I checked the security logs from a terminal. My access to the surgical wing appeared as a routine medication check, authorized and unremarkable. The modified reader I'd installed remained dormant, invisible to standard security protocols. The system accepted the lie, just like everyone else had. Tuesday was approaching, demonstration day. The day Vanessa's carefully constructed career would encounter an unexpected tremor of its own. The package from my neurologist arrived Thursday morning. I signed for it with trembling fingers, ironic given its contents. Inside, the familiar orange prescription bottle contained my monthly tremor medication, the experimental treatment that had changed everything. I remembered the first time Dr. Keller had suggested it 7 years ago. It won't cure the tremors completely, he'd explained, but the early trials show promising reduction in symptom severity. What neither of us had anticipated was the secondary effect: enhanced cognitive focus, heightened pattern recognition, a strange, almost transcendent clarity of thought that accompanied the steadier hands. Side effects normally brushed aside in pharmaceutical trials became my secret advantage. I held the bottle up to the morning light streaming through my apartment window. Small white tablets that had become my bridge between two worlds. The trembling nurse others pitied, and the calculating architect of precise revenge. The recommended dosage was 1 tablet every 12 hours. For normal tremor management, that sufficed. But I'd discovered that a carefully calibrated dose of 3 tablets provided 6 hours of almost supernatural steadiness, both physical and mental, and I swallowed 2 tablets with water, saving the larger dose for when I would need it most. The hospital demonstration was 4 days away. My phone chimed with a text from Vanessa. Need your files on early sepsis cases from last quarter. Preparing final presentation. The audacity never ceased to amaze me. I typed back, on hospital server, public folder? Her response came seconds later. Can't access, send directly. I smiled slightly. System issues? Try your credentials again. The subtle test had been planted. If she tried accessing those files now, the shadow account would register the attempt. One more digital breadcrumb in my carefully constructed trail. 3 hours later, I arrived for my shift. The hospital buzzed with preparation for Tuesday's demonstration. Additional cleaning crews polished floors to mirror shine. Fresh floral arrangements appeared in administrative areas. Security personnel conducted extended sweeps of public spaces. I made my way to the ER, nodding to familiar faces. My tremors were minimal today, the standard dose working effectively. At my station, I logged into the terminal and discreetly checked the security access logs. There it was. Vanessa had attempted to access my files at 10:47 a.m. The shadow account had recorded the attempt, adding it to the pattern recognition algorithm I'd created. You look pleased about something. Zoe, the observant intern, appeared at my shoulder. I quickly switched screens. Just a good day tremor-wise. She nodded toward my hands. I've been reading about neural pathway regeneration after transplant rejection. Fascinating how the body adapts. Some adaptations are more useful than others. I pulled up a patient chart. How's the sepsis case in bed 4? Responding well to the Lawrence protocol. She lowered her voice. Though I noticed it's almost identical to the approach you documented in that case study last year. Our eyes met briefly. Understanding passed between us. Another witness to the truth. Medical progress builds on previous work, I replied carefully. Some people just build on it more directly than others. She handed me a tablet. I saved copies of your original documentation, by the way, for educational purposes. Before I could respond, my pager beeped. Emergency and Trauma Bay 2. For the next 4 hours, I worked alongside the team stabilizing a construction worker with crush injuries. My hands remained surprisingly steady as I assisted with the central line placement, my focus sharp despite the chaos. When the crisis passed, I checked my watch. 7:23 p.m. Time to test the next phase of my plan. I made my way to the quiet West Wing, where administrative offices stood empty after business hours. Using my badge, I accessed the server corridor that ran behind the executive suite. Few staff even knew these maintenance passages existed, but my years on night shift had taught me every hospital shortcut. The biometric security panel controlling executive access required department head credentials. I pulled a small device from my pocket, a modified RFID duplicator I'd built during countless sleepless mornings. When placed against the panel, it cycled through stored credential signatures until finding one that triggered recognition. The panel hesitated, then blinked green. Inside the narrow corridor, network junction boxes lined the wall at regular intervals. I located Box E7, the connection serving the surgical wing's isolated systems. During demonstrations, this network operated independently to prevent hospital-wide issues from affecting critical procedures. I carefully connected my diagnostic tablet to the test port. The security protocol appeared on screen, requesting authorization. I entered the hospital director's credentials, obtained through weeks of careful observation and digital reconstruction. Access granted. Working quickly, I isolated the timing sequence for the anesthesia verification system. During Tuesday's demonstration, this system would require Vanessa's biometric confirmation to release the medications needed for the procedure. The modified reader I'd installed would create a 1-second delay in recognition, imperceptible to humans but significant to the digital verification protocol. When Vanessa attempted to access the system during the demonstration, it would register a security anomaly. The first attempt would fail silently. The second attempt would trigger the conflict I'd programmed. The third would activate complete OR lockdown. 3 attempts, 3 failures, 3 years of stolen research revealed. I disconnected my tablet and restored the junction box to its original state. As I prepared to leave, voices in the executive corridor froze me in place. The pharmaceutical representatives arrived Monday evening. The hospital director's voice. Everything must be flawless for Tuesday's demonstration. It will be, Richard. Vanessa's confident tone. I've personally overseen every detail. This could be the biggest breakthrough in sepsis treatment in decades. The licensing potential alone. Not to mention the research grants. I've already drafted proposals for expanded clinical applications. Their voices faded as they moved away from the maintenance corridor. I waited several minutes before exiting, my heart pounding despite my outward calm. The stakes were even higher than I'd realized. Vanessa wasn't just stealing my research, she was building an empire on it. Back in the ER, I completed my shift with mechanical efficiency. When 3 a.m. arrived, the quietest hour in any hospital, I made my way to the basement security hub. Access required dual authentication, but I'd prepared for this. I swiped my badge, then applied the fingerprint patch. The door clicked open. The security hub housed backup servers for all hospital systems. During critical failures, these servers maintained essential functions. I located the biometric verification terminal and logged in using my created credentials. On screen, I navigated to the emergency protocols section. During any security breach, the hospital followed strict containment procedures. For the surgical wing, this meant automatic door sealing, network isolation, and immediate notification of security personnel. I modified a single line of code in the notification protocol. When activated, the system would still secure the surgical wing, still isolate the network, but the notification would be delayed by exactly 4 minutes, long enough for the full system to display the security violation on the surgical theater's main monitors before help arrived, long enough for investors to witness the evidence of Vanessa's fraud. As I finished, the terminal suddenly logged me out. A system notification appeared. Routine security update in progress. All modifications will be reviewed by IT administration. My heart raced. Had I been discovered? I quickly checked the log details. No, just standard overnight system maintenance. My modifications had been completed before the automatic update began. Still, I needed to verify my changes had survived the update. I would need to return tomorrow night for final confirmation. I exited the security hub, making my way back to the ER through deserted corridors. My tremors had returned, the medication wearing off as tension increased. I concentrated on my breathing, steadying my hands through force of will. At the nurse's station, I completed my charting as dawn approached. Malik appeared at my shoulder, coffee in hand. "You look exhausted," he observed, sliding a second cup toward me. "Long night." I accepted the coffee gratefully. "You've been pulling a lot of extra shifts lately. Everything okay?" I nodded, sipping the bitter liquid. "Just focused on some research." "Speaking of research, everyone's talking about your sister's demonstration Tuesday. Pretty impressive stuff." "Yes," I agreed quietly. "Pretty impressive how quickly she developed it." He studied me for a moment. "You know, I always thought it was strange how similar her protocol is to those cases you documented last year." I looked up, surprised by his perception. "Medical ideas evolve." "Sure, but the statistical modeling is identical." "I noticed because I helped you run those initial analyses, remember? Those night shifts when the system kept crashing?" Another witness. Another person who saw the truth beneath Vanessa's carefully constructed facade. "I remember," I said carefully. "Just seems odd, that's all." He shrugged, moving toward his next patient. "Some people climb by standing on others' shoulders, others by stepping on their heads." As my shift ended, I checked my watch. 72 hours until the demonstration. I needed rest. But first, I returned to my apartment and checked the secure cloud server where I stored backup evidence of my research development. Every file, every data point, every milestone in the protocol's creation, all meticulously documented with timestamps and authentication. If Tuesday went as planned, this evidence would become unnecessary. Vanessa's fraud would be exposed in the most public, irrefutable way possible. But I'd learned never to operate without contingencies. I swallowed another tremor medication and lay down, setting my alarm for 6 hours later. As consciousness faded, I found myself dreaming of operating rooms and locked doors, of blinking red lights, and sister who had once held my hand through childhood nightmares but now stole my life's work without hesitation. In my dreams, her Apple Watch transformed into handcuffs, binding her wrists as she pleaded for help I no longer wished to give. Tuesday arrived with perfect theatrical timing. Clear skies, moderate temperature, ideal conditions for impressing hospital investors. I awoke before my alarm, a strange calm settling over me. 3 tablets of tremor medication with breakfast. Today's steady hands weren't just helpful, they were essential. The hospital's main entrance featured a new banner stretching across the atrium. The Lawrence Sepsis Protocol Revolutionizing Critical Care. Security guards checked credentials at every entrance, unusual for a weekday morning. I badged through the employee entrance, noting the pharmaceutical company representatives gathering in the lobby, designer suits distinguishing them from the usual hospital crowd. In the locker room, I changed into fresh scrubs, dark blue senior nursing staff designation. My reflection in the mirror looked remarkably composed for someone about to dismantle a medical fraud. I secured my ID badge, checked my wrist brace containing the essential flash drive, and headed to the ER for abbreviated morning rounds before the demonstration. Dr. Lin intercepted me near Trauma Bay 1. Jules, hospital administration wants you to assist with the OR demonstration today. I froze. What? They need an experienced sepsis nurse, and you've handled more cases than anyone. Or 3 at 9:30. She handed me the official assignment. Looks like you'll be working with your sister after all. This wasn't part of my plan. Direct participation created complications, variables I hadn't anticipated. Still, it offered unprecedented access to the demonstration systems. Of course, I replied smoothly. Happy to assist. At 9:15, I arrived at the surgical wing preparation area. The corridor buzzed with activity. Technical staff adjusting camera equipment, PR representatives distributing materials to observers, security personnel establishing perimeters around sensitive areas. The scrub room connected to OR3 was empty when I entered. I carefully washed my hands, the ritual motions automatic after years of practice. The tremors were barely noticeable, the triple dose working perfectly. I dried my hands and donned surgical gloves with practiced efficiency. I didn't expect to see you here. Vanessa's voice from the doorway. Her tone suggested this wasn't a pleasant surprise. Dr. Lin assigned me. I turned, meeting her gaze directly. Apparently, my sepsis experience was requested by administration and not by me. She moved to the sink, beginning her own scrub routine. Just follow protocol and stay in the background. The investors don't need to see unnecessary staff. Unnecessary staff. 7 years of specialized sepsis research reduced to that dismissal. Of course, Dr. Lawrence. I kept my voice professional. I'm familiar with the protocol. Her eyes narrowed slightly at my emphasis. We'll use the modified anesthesia induction sequence I developed. Dr. Winters has been briefed. I nodded, knowing the modified sequence was actually my design, documented in research notes she'd stolen months ago. The patient is already prepped, she continued. Full demonstration of the protocol will take approximately 90 minutes. The pharmaceutical representatives will observe from the gallery. And the hospital board? Front row. She smiled tightly, along with representatives from 3 major research foundations. If today goes well, we're looking at 8-figure funding. We, as if I'd ever been included in her calculations. The OR technicians arrived, breaking our tense exchange. I moved into the operating theater, taking my position at the nursing station. The room gleamed under intense lighting, every surface polished to perfection. Monitoring equipment hummed softly. The anesthesia cart stood prepared, its medication access panel requiring biometric verification before use. The modified reader I'd installed waited silently beneath its official cover. Observers filled the gallery above, pharmaceutical executives, board members, medical journalists. In the front row, the hospital director beamed with anticipation. Beside him, representatives from research foundations scanned the surgical setup with professional interest. Dr. Winters, the anesthesiologist, entered with her team. The patient followed on a gurney, Mr. Reynolds, 62, early-stage sepsis, selected specifically to demonstrate the protocol's effectiveness. Vanessa entered last, the picture of surgical confidence. Her mask couldn't hide her satisfied expression as she surveyed the gathered observers. Good morning, she addressed the gallery. Today we demonstrate the Lawrence Sepsis Protocol. a revolutionary approach to early intervention in septic patients. This methodology represents a breakthrough in both detection and treatment of systemic infection before conventional markers appear. My methodology, my research, my breakthrough. We'll begin with the specialized medication sequence developed as part of this protocol. She approached the anesthesia cart, nodding to Dr. Winters. The critical moment had arrived. According to procedure, Vanessa needed to authorize the medication release using her biometric credentials. She pressed her thumb against the scanner, waiting for the green confirmation. The scanner hesitated. A small frown appeared above her surgical mask. "System's running slow today." She tried again. The scanner light flickered between yellow and red. "Technical difficulties," she said smoothly to the observers. "One moment." Third attempt. The scanner flashed red. Access denied. Throughout the room, monitoring screens suddenly shifted. Security protocol activated. On the main display visible to the entire gallery, a message appeared. Unauthorized access attempt. Credential verification failure. Vanessa stared at the screen, momentary confusion giving way to alarm as the system continued its automated response. Cross-reference database search. Research origin verification. The doors to the operating room sealed with a pneumatic hiss. Emergency lockdown. What's happening?" Dr. Winters asked, looking between the screens and Vanessa. On the main display, my research files began to appear. The original timestamps, my electronic signature, data collection spanning 3 years. Alongside each file, Vanessa's duplicate versions appeared, created months or weeks later, identical in content but bearing her name. The evidence I'd embedded in the security protocol unfurled for all witnesses. Side-by-side comparison of identical research with different attribution. Irrefutable proof of systematic theft. Vanessa's face drained of color above her surgical mask. "This is a system malfunction." She rushed to the main terminal, attempting to override the display. Each keystroke triggered more evidence. Original lab notes. Video timestamps of sample processing. Research journal entries. All mine. All stolen. All now visible to every investor, board member, and medical journalist in the gallery. The hospital director stood abruptly, pointing to a security guard. "Shut it down!" But the isolated surgical network prevented external interference. The system continued its methodical display of evidence exactly as I had programmed it. From my position at the nursing station, I remained perfectly still, hands steady for perhaps the first time in 7 years. A lifetime of tremors had taught me patience, had taught me to build workarounds, had taught me that sometimes the most devastating tremors weren't in hands, but in foundations built on lies. Vanessa's Apple Watch began vibrating with incoming messages, probably frantic communications from the director and PR team. She glanced desperately around the room, finally locking eyes with me. Recognition dawned slowly across her features. "You," she whispered, inaudible to others but clear to me. I maintained my professional demeanor, though I allowed myself the smallest nod. The EKG monitor suddenly switched displays, showing side-by-side access logs. On one side, Vanessa's after-hours entries to research areas where she had no assigned projects. On the other, timestamps of file duplications matching those exact access periods. This is a mistake," she stammered to the increasingly disturbed gallery. She lunged for the override panel, her surgical gloves catching on the metal edge. The perfectly manicured nail on her index finger snapped backward, drawing blood. "Dr. Lawrence," Dr. Winters said firmly, "we need to stabilize the patient and transfer him. Security protocols require evacuation during system breaches." But Vanessa seemed beyond hearing. She stared at the screens, at the blood seeping through her torn glove, at the faces of investors witnessing her unraveling. The hospital director was on his phone, gesturing frantically. The pharmaceutical representatives whispered among themselves, some already gathering their materials to leave. 4 minutes after lockdown initiated, security override codes finally activated. The doors unsealed. Emergency personnel entered to safely transfer the patient. Technical staff rushed to terminal access points. But it was too late. The evidence had been displayed. The Lawrence sepsis protocol had revealed its true origin. As the room emptied, Vanessa remained frozen before the screens. Her perfect composure, the confident surgeon, the brilliant researcher, the rising star, had collapsed like a house built on sand. I moved toward the door with the evacuating staff. As I passed her, our eyes met briefly. The system doesn't lie, I said quietly. People do. Outside in the corridor, chaos reigned. The hospital PR team attempted to contain pharmaceutical representatives demanding explanations. Board members huddled in tense conversation. Security personnel established perimeters around the compromised area. I slipped away unnoticed, returning to the ER as if nothing had happened. My assigned shift wouldn't begin for hours, but I needed the comforting routine of familiar work. More importantly, I needed a public alibi distancing me from the technical malfunction. Malik looked up as I entered the emergency department. "You're early." "Thought I'd get a head start," I replied calmly. "Seems like something's happening in the surgical wing." "Some kind of security breach during your sister's big demonstration." He studied my face. "System displayed a bunch of research files with your name on them, from what I hear." "Really?" I kept my expression neutral. "Really?" He nodded slowly. "Funny coincidence." "Not coincidence, justice." By evening, the hospital buzzed with developments. The demonstration had been officially postponed due to technical difficulties. The pharmaceutical representatives had departed. The hospital board had convened an emergency session, and Vanessa had been escorted to the director's office. Her surgical schedule cleared indefinitely. On my tablet, I monitored the internal communications. The security team had discovered the modified reader. The IT department had identified unauthorized system modifications. The investigation was focusing on external hacking. No one suspected the trembling nurse who could barely manage an IV line without concentration. No one except Vanessa. As I finished my shift, a message appeared on my phone. "Need to talk, or 3, now." The same operating theater where her career had begun unraveling hours before. Fitting. I made my way through quiet corridors. The surgical wing had been cleared of all non-essential personnel during the investigation. OR 3 stood dark, illuminated only by the standby lights of monitoring equipment. Vanessa waited inside, her white coat replaced by street clothes, her perfect appearance disheveled for the first time in years. "You destroyed everything," she said without preamble. Her voice echoed slightly in the empty room. "No." I remained by the door. "You did that yourself." "It was my protocol." It was mine," I interrupted firmly. "Every sample, every test, every breakthrough. You stole years of my work and slapped your name on it. I refined it, made it viable." She moved toward me, stopping at the steel operating table between us. No one would have listened to a nurse with tremors. "So you made them listen to a surgeon with stolen research." She placed her hands on the cold table surface. I noticed with satisfaction that they were shaking slightly. "The board is launching a full investigation." "They'll find everything." I stepped closer. I kept backups of all my work, timestamps, development notes, every iteration of the protocol with my electronic signature. "We can fix this." Her tone shifted suddenly, the first hint of desperation. "We can say it was collaborative, a sister project." I almost laughed. "A sister project? After you erased me completely?" "We shared a womb," she exclaimed, anger and pleading strangely mixed. "But not scalpel ethics?" I remained unmoved. "You saw my condition as weakness, something that made me lesser. You never understood that the tremors taught me to build workarounds, to see vulnerabilities in systems, to create solutions no steady-handed surgeon would imagine." Understanding dawned slowly across her features. "The security system, the biometric failures. That was you?" I didn't answer directly. "The medication that helps my tremors has interesting side effects. Enhanced focus, pattern recognition. Perfect for security systems work." "You planned this?" She stared at me with new awareness. "All of it." "You stole my work," I replied simply. "I reclaimed my life." Her expression hardened. "I'll tell them. I'll tell everyone you sabotaged the demonstration." "With these hands?" I held them up, letting her see the persistent trembling that had returned as my medication wore off. "The same hands you've repeatedly mocked as incapable of precision work? The same hands that supposedly make me unfit for anything beyond basic nursing?" She had no response to that. "Besides," I continued, "the investigation will show external digital signatures, untraceable pathways. nothing leading to a trembling nurse. She turned away, staring at the darkened monitors where her career had collapsed hours before. What do you want? Money? Recognition? I wanted justice. I moved toward the door. I've gotten it. Jules, her voice stopped me. We're still sisters. I looked back at her, remembering the child who had once protected me from playground bullies, who had held my hand during doctor appointments, who had slowly transformed into someone who saw me as competition to be eliminated rather than family to be cherished. Yes, I agreed quietly, and that makes your betrayal worse, not better. I left her standing alone in the darkened operating theater, surrounded by the ruins of an empire built on theft. Justice, like medicine, sometimes required precision cuts to remove diseased tissue. Sometimes healing could only begin after a necessary excision. My hands trembled slightly as I pushed through the hospital doors into the cool evening air. But my steps were steady. The ethics committee convened 72 hours later in the hospital's wood-paneled conference room. 9 senior medical professionals, 3 board members, and the hospital's legal counsel sat around the massive oak table. At the center, a leather portfolio containing my evidence rested like a silent witness. I'd received the formal summons that morning, a request to provide context for research discrepancies. The carefully neutral language couldn't mask the urgency. 3 days of internal investigation had led them directly to the source of the Lawrence sepsis protocol. As I entered, conversations hushed. I recognized each face. Doctors who had overlooked me for years, administrators who had dismissed my contributions, colleagues who had always seen my tremors first and my abilities second. Vanessa sat opposite the door, the hospital director beside her. Her posture remained perfect, her expression controlled, but the shadows beneath her eyes revealed sleepless nights. The director looked worse, his usual confidence replaced by grim resignation. Nurse Lawrence, the ethics committee chair began. Thank you for joining us. We're investigating serious allegations regarding research attribution. I took my seat, placing my own documentation on the table. My hands trembled slightly as I arranged the papers, not from nervousness, but from deliberately skipping my medication. Today, the tremors would underline my narrative rather than undermining it. I understand, I replied calmly. To be clear, the chair continued, evidence suggests the sepsis protocol recently presented by Dr. Lawrence originated substantially from your research. The director leaned forward. Before we continue, I want to emphasize that any research conducted on hospital time using hospital resources belongs to Northern Memorial. Attribution questions are secondary to ownership, a transparent attempt to salvage the situation. Ownership wasn't the issue. The hospital would own the protocol regardless. The issue was fraud. I'm happy to clarify the development process, I said, opening my portfolio. I've maintained complete documentation of my sepsis research over the past 3 years. For the next 40 minutes, I methodically presented evidence. Original research notes with timestamps, laboratory access logs, sample processing documentation, development milestones with electronic signatures. The timeline was irrefutable. My work predated every aspect of Vanessa's breakthrough by months or years. As I spoke, I noticed several committee members exchanging glances. They had expected excuses, accusations, emotional appeals. Instead, they received clinical precision, the same approach I'd applied to my research. This documentation shows 3 specific instances of complete protocol transfer, I concluded, indicating the final exhibit. Each instance occurred during after-hours access to research areas where Dr. Lawrence had no assigned projects. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice tight. Jules and I discussed collaboration from the beginning. This was a shared project that I helped refine for clinical application. Is there documentation of this collaboration agreement? The committee chair asked. It was a verbal understanding between sisters, she replied smoothly. Jules developed promising initial research, and I contributed the surgical application framework. The director nodded eagerly. Family collaborations often operate less formally. The important thing is that the protocol works. I almost admired their coordinated defense. Almost. If this was a collaboration, I asked quietly, why does all public material credit Dr. Lawrence as sole developer? Why was my name removed from all research documentation? Why was I excluded from the clinical trials team? The room fell silent. Further, I continued, if this was a collaboration, why did Dr. Lawrence access my research files exclusively during night shifts when I wasn't present? Why copy data rather than request it? Why relabel samples with only her identification? I pulled the final document from my portfolio. Security camera footage showing Vanessa in the research lab at 2:17 a.m., systematically transferring my samples to containers bearing her name. The director paled visibly. This is a serious privacy violation. Security footage requires administrative approval for investigation of potential research misconduct, the committee chair interrupted, which is precisely what appears to have occurred. Vanessa's composure finally cracked. You don't understand what's at stake. This protocol could save thousands of lives. The pharmaceutical partnerships alone are worth millions, I finished for her. Lives will still be saved. The research remains valid. But the attribution was fraudulent. The committee chair turned to the hospital director. Dr. Chen, were you aware of these attribution discrepancies? His hesitation was answer enough. We prioritized rapid development, he finally said. The protocol showed extraordinary promise. Dr. Lawrence has the professional standing to move it forward quickly. While Nurse Lawrence doesn't, I observed, letting the implication settle. My tremors made me unsuitable as the face of a revolutionary protocol. Isn't that right, Richard? He couldn't meet my eyes. The committee entered closed deliberation, asking Vanessa and me to wait outside. In the hallway, we sat on opposite sides of a sterile waiting area. The silence between us stretched like surgical thread pulled too tight. You could have stopped this, she finally said, staring at the wall. You could have accepted my offer in the OR. To become a footnote in my own research, to validate your theft, to save both our careers. Her voice held no remorse, only calculation. Now neither of us wins. I looked at my hands, the steady tremor that had once ended my surgical aspirations. I already won. The truth matters more than career advancement. Such nobility, she scoffed. You think they'll let you lead clinical trials? Present at conferences? The tremors make you a liability as the face of breakthrough research. I don't need to be the face, I replied simply. I just needed to stop being erased. Before she could respond, the committee door opened. We were called back inside. The chair's expression was grave. After reviewing the evidence, this committee finds clear patterns of research misappropriation. We are recommending immediate suspension of Dr. Vanessa Lawrence's clinical and research privileges pending full investigation. Vanessa's face remained frozen in professional mask, but her hands gripped the chair arms until her knuckles whitened. Additionally, the chair continued, we are recommending suspension of Dr. Richard Chen from administrative duties during the investigation of his role in facilitating research misconduct. The director started to protest, but his attorney placed a warning hand on his arm. Nurse Lawrence's original research documentation will be submitted to the hospital board with recommendation for full attribution and inclusion in all future protocol development. It was more than I'd expected. Not just exposure of the fraud, but recognition of my work. As the meeting concluded, committee members filed out. Several nodded to me with new respect. The hospital attorney remained behind, speaking quietly with Vanessa and the director about damage control and regulatory reporting requirements. I gathered my documentation, securing it in my portfolio. The leather felt smooth beneath my trembling fingers, a satisfying contrast. Vanessa intercepted me at the door. This isn't over. It is, I replied, meeting her gaze. It was over the moment you decided your career was worth more than the truth. I can still fight this, challenge your evidence, question your motives. You can try, I stepped past her, but systems don't lie, people do. In the corridor outside, I paused at a window overlooking the hospital entrance. The Lawrence Sepsis Protocol banner had been removed. The promotional materials featuring Vanessa's face were gone. My phone buzzed with an email notification. The hospital board requested my presence at tomorrow's emergency session. Subject line, Protocol Attribution and Development Leadership. 3 years. 3 betrayals. 3 witnesses to the truth. That evening, I returned to the research lab one final time. The space felt different now. No longer a site of theft, but a place of vindication. I methodically packed my personal belongings into a small box. My research journal, reference materials, the custom pipette holder designed to accommodate my tremors, the antiseptic smell that had defined my professional life for 7 years suddenly seemed cloying rather than familiar. The gleaming equipment surfaces reflected my movements as I cleared my workspace. I sat at the main terminal, accessing my research database. All files remained intact, now with proper attribution restored. I composed an email to the Medical Ethics Board, attaching comprehensive documentation of both the protocol development and the subsequent investigation. Clinical trials would continue, lives would be saved, the protocol would work regardless of who received credit. But something had shifted inside me. The hospital that had ignored and undermined me now sought to embrace me. The institution that had enabled theft now proclaimed commitment to integrity. The system that had failed me now offered redress. Too late, the damage was done. Not to my career, but to my faith in the institution itself. I drafted my resignation letter, simple, professional, effective. No accusations, no recriminations. Just a clear statement that my continuing research would be conducted elsewhere. The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting for confirmation. Send or delete, stay or go. The system that had failed me also gave me the tools to expose the truth. The hospital that enabled theft also provided the evidence to prove it. Nothing was simple. Not justice, not revenge, not healing. I thought of the patients who would benefit from the protocol regardless of who implemented it. I thought of the sepsis cases I'd diagnosed that others missed. I thought of Mr. Abernathy telling me not to let others take credit for my work. I clicked send. The resignation letter disappeared from my screen, winging its way to hospital administration. The system blinked confirmation. Message delivered. I gathered my box of belongings and took a final look around the lab. 7 years of work, 3 years of systematic theft, 1 moment of complete reset. The system reset, so would I. I removed my hospital ID badge, placing it beside the terminal. The magnetic strip that had granted me access to research areas, that had facilitated my revenge, that had defined my professional identity, now just a plastic rectangle with my name in trembling hands. I walked out without looking back. Epilogue. The salt-laden breeze drifted through open windows, ruffling the lightweight curtains of my small coastal clinic. 1 year had passed since I'd walked away from Northern Memorial, badge left on a terminal, truth finally acknowledged. My examination room bore little resemblance to the gleaming, antiseptic spaces of the hospital. Weathered wood floors creaked pleasantly beneath my feet. Equipment was basic but functional, chosen for effectiveness rather than institutional impression. The walls, painted a soft blue reminiscent of the ocean visible through the windows, displayed framed medical certificates alongside local artists' seascapes. On my tablet, a news notification appeared with a familiar name. Former Northern Memorial Surgical Director Vanessa Lawrence faces extended license suspension. I skimmed the article detailing the ongoing investigation into Northern Memorial Hospital and its parent chain for systemic research misconduct. Vanessa's meteoric rise had become an equally spectacular fall. I closed the notification without finishing the article. Those headlines had long stopped providing satisfaction. Mrs. Patel entered carrying her infant granddaughter, concern etched into her weathered face. "She's been feverish since yesterday, Dr. Jules." "Let's have a look." I motioned them to the examination table, my hands steady as I checked the baby's vital signs. The coastal community I served had limited access to medical care before my arrival. Fishermen, service workers, retirees on fixed incomes. Patients whose needs were often overlooked by prestigious medical centers. Here, my diagnostic skills mattered more than institutional affiliation. Between appointments, I continued my research in the modest lab I'd established in the back room. Without bureaucratic constraints, the sepsis protocol had evolved further, incorporating refinements that would have required months of approval at Northern Memorial. The clinic phone rang just as I finished notes on my last patient. "Coastal Health, this is Dr. Lawrence." "Jules, it's Zoe." The former intern's voice brought an immediate smile. I'm finishing my residency next month. I know your clinic is small, but I was wondering if you might have room for another doctor. You'd trade a hospital career for this? I glanced around my modest surroundings. I'd trade politics for practice any day, she replied firmly. What you're doing there, it matters. After we hung up, I stepped onto the small deck overlooking the shoreline. The tide was coming in, waves methodically reshaping the beach with persistent purpose. The tremors taught me patience. Revenge taught me purpose. But healing had brought me home to myself. Hold still, Mr. Ramirez. I carefully cleaned the jagged wound on the fisherman's forearm. The injury itself wasn't concerning, but his elevated temperature and the red streaking from the laceration signaled the early septic response I'd become expert at identifying. My diagnostic kit, a streamlined version of the protocol that once bore my sister's name, confirmed my suspicion. Early-stage sepsis, caught before conventional markers, would trigger alarm. You're lucky you came in today, I told him, preparing the treatment. Another 12 hours, and this would have been much more serious. The clinic's modest setup lacked the impressive technology of Northern Memorial, but the essential components of my protocol required only careful observation and targeted intervention. I drew up the precise medication combination I'd spent years perfecting. Threading the suture needle, I noticed my hands were steady despite taking only a minimal dose of my medication this morning. The tremors remained, but they'd become less pronounced over time. Not from medical improvement, but from adaptation. My fingers had learned to work with the tremors rather than fighting against them. Most doctors would have sent me home with antibiotics, Mr. Ramirez observed as I closed his wound with neat, careful stitches. My cousin got the same symptoms last year. By the time the hospital realized it was sepsis, he needed 2 weeks in intensive care. I tied off the final suture, the black thread stark against his sun-darkened skin. Early detection makes all the difference. As I cleaned up, the clinic television murmured in the background. A financial news segment caught my attention. Northern Memorial's parent chain was facing bankruptcy after multiple lawsuits. The camera briefly showed the hospital director, now former director, being escorted from corporate headquarters. I switched off the television. There was no satisfaction in watching their downfall. My focus had shifted entirely to what I was building rather than what I'd left behind. Later, as twilight painted the ocean purple gold, I reviewed Mr. Ramirez's treatment plan. The modest clinic, the simple equipment, the direct patient connection, all represented something Vanessa had never understood. Medicine wasn't about prestigious hospital wings bearing your name. It was about steady hands doing necessary work, regardless of recognition. My phone chimed with a text message. Unknown number, but the content made the sender clear. Jules, the medical board restored my limited practice privileges. I'm starting over at a small hospital in Arizona. I should have acknowledged your work from the beginning. I'm sorry. 7 words I never expected from my sister. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. I set the phone aside without responding. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt, but perhaps they could be remembered without bitterness. The tremor started after a car accident 3 years ago, Emma explained, extending her shaking hands. They told me it was neurological damage from the trauma. Nothing to be done except manage it. I recognized myself in her frustrated expression, the careful way she moved to compensate for unpredictable movements. Her medical record showed a familiar pattern. A promising college athlete whose career ended with injury, whose identity had been redefined by physical limitation. I understand tremors better than most, I told her, showing my own hands with their surgical scars and subtle shaking. They don't define what you can accomplish. The sepsis protocol that had been the center of so much drama now formed just one component of my practice. I'd expanded my research focus to include neurological tremor management, developing a modified treatment approach that combined medication with targeted physical therapy. I connected Emma to the monitoring equipment, the steady beat marking her heart rate filling the quiet room. The experimental treatment won't eliminate the tremors completely, but early results show significant improvement in function. As I administered the first dose, I watched the subtle changes in her muscle tension. The monitor's rhythm remained steady, a technological counterpoint to our conversation. A doctor at Northern Memorial told me I should adjust my expectations about what I could do with my hands. Emma's voice held the familiar mix of frustration and determination I knew intimately. Adjusting expectations doesn't mean lowering them, I replied. It means finding different pathways to your goals. The treatment complete, I was disconnecting the monitor when my phone vibrated with an incoming call. Vanessa's name appeared on the screen. Not from an unknown number this time. Direct contact after a year of silence. I let it go to voicemail, focusing instead on reviewing Emma's treatment plan. The monitor's beeping slowed as I powered down the machine for the night. Later, alone in the clinic, with only the sound of waves through open windows, I listened to Vanessa's message. Jules, I'm coming to San Diego next month for medical ethics conference. Ironic, I know. I'm presenting on research integrity. Apparently, my experience makes me an expert in what not to do. A pause, then, I'd like to see you if you're willing. Not to fix things, just to talk. As doctors. Maybe even as sisters again someday. I set the phone down and moved through my end-of-day routine, turning off equipment, checking supplies, closing windows against the evening fog rolling in from the ocean. The last patient file, Emma's, sat open on my desk waiting for final notes. My hands trembled slightly as I wrote the treatment summary, but the words formed clearly on the page. Tomorrow, Emma would return for her second treatment. Tomorrow, Mr. Ramirez would have his wound checked. Tomorrow, more patients would arrive with problems needing solutions rather than excuses. I closed the file and turned off the desk lamp, decision made. Some tremors never fully disappear, but we learn to work with steady purpose nonetheless. In the darkened clinic, my scarred hands locked the door with practiced ease. The ocean's rhythm continued outside, persistent, methodical, healing in its constancy. Like the tremors that had shaped my path, it reminded me that some forces cannot be eliminated, only channeled. And in that channeling, we find our truest strength.